Welcome. I'm Steph, an intuitive hypnotist from Quebec, Canada.
I'm Julie, a past life regression hypnotist and Reiki healer from Wisconsin.
And together, we are the Soulful Mystics.
So for our first topic, we chose to chat about spiritual awakening. Because of how many energy workers are coming online these past couple of years, we thought it was really important to bring all of the struggles and any advice that we have up to the surface. So we're going to talk about the ups and downs, our own experiences while being completely transparent in our struggles, lessons, and the good things that came following the signs and synchronicities. And we'll share self-care tips that helped us along the way. So Julie, I'm so happy that we get to chat about this. What would you describe a spiritual awakening as?
Yeah, so spiritual awakening, in my opinion, it's going to differ from person to person, right? Everybody's experience is different and everybody's experience is valid. I actually Googled this and I really had a hard time finding a really good definition of what a spiritual awakening is. But I did find a blog post. It's from a soulfulrebellion.com. And so I just want to share like a little bit about what they say a spiritual awakening is. And they say a spiritual awakening is a call to a higher consciousness and deeper mental awareness. The process of awakening brings about personal transformation and a shift in one's worldview. When someone goes through a spiritual awakening, they can experience a shift in their mental framework. And I think that last part there, the shift in their mental framework, is really important. That's the key. Also, too, spiritual awakenings happen for different reasons. And so, a few examples would be like a traumatic experience, maybe an accident or something like that.
Mhm.
Life-changing events. Sometimes people go through like a crisis or something like that, like a dark night of the soul. Near-death experiences are another big one. And then the last one it says on here is a natural awakening. And here's the thing, like for me personally, and I know we'll get into this more, I feel like I don't fit into the categories. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? On here it says a natural awakening, and I'm going to read the definition of what they have here. And it says this is an involuntary process of awakening. It takes place after engaging in a practice that produces a shift in conscious awareness. So that can be anything from like meditation, mindfulness, um, just any kind of self transformational practice or anything like that. It can, yoga, whatever. And I feel like that is probably most fitting for me personally.
Yeah. And I love the Soulful Rebellion name.
Yeah, I
Like
thought
that's
you
what it
would.
feels like. It feels like a rebellion. And it's exactly like you said. So the physical symptoms were major for me. The physical symptoms of going to my doctor and having all these tests done and all these tests coming back as like, you're fine, but still having those physical symptoms and to the point and mental symptoms of having to leave work. What I've learned when doing studies after realizing that like my doctor didn't have the answers, I looked into more spiritual reasons as to why. And what I learned is there is a huge energetic shift happening within our body. So our cells need to adapt and evolve in order to take on that new energy. And so in order to do that, our body needs time to adjust because our body isn't equipped for that kind of energy right away, like that big shift. And so that could be or that's what I told myself is like, my body's just not adapting as quick as my soul's evolution is. And so I just need to give my body rest and time to adjust. And then the mental symptoms, I thought that I was going crazy because I didn't know anyone who was going through similar things at the time. And I kept telling myself, okay, you're not crazy. I was diagnosed with PTSD as one, depression, anxiety, agoraphobia. I just had a lot of trouble getting out of my house. All of these symptoms that were coming up, I was diagnosed with. But me today and me before the awakening, I never had those symptoms. I was never afraid to go outside. I never had these issues before. So that really made me question. And I do think that spiritual awakening is a lot of questioning and curiosity of like, there must be more out there because I'm not feeling like I'm meeting my standard of living.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you feel like you had any of those physical symptoms?
Yes, absolutely. As you know, I had severe headache for an entire year, so that was definitely a physical symptom. However, as I was going through it, I didn't know what was happening. Like I didn't have the wherewithal like you did to say, "Oh, doctor's coming up blank, so hey, it must be something spiritual." Like for me, that was not on my radar at all. I was in pure misery for an entire year.
Oh
Um,
yeah, too though. It took me a little while to figure it out, but yeah.
Yeah. Also, too, I did have the depression. My awakening started before COVID. It was like a slow progression looking back where I started meditating, getting into more of the spiritual stuff, but I never thought at the time that I was awakening. But
Yeah.
at the same time, too, it was like getting into something that's new to me. And I don't have anybody around me who's into this
Mhm.
spiritual stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm not talking to people about this. And so it's like a slow progression of like slowly pulling away from people and not really meaning to. And that happened before COVID. And then during COVID, now I have an excuse.
Yeah.
I don't have to see people and you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that really fed into the isolation. And I think so many people went through that.
Yeah.
And then after the isolation, it was like, okay, now I'm depressed and I'm experiencing a severe depression like I've never experienced before.
Hmm.
And here I'm thinking like I'm doing all these good things for myself, like meditating and, the mindfulness and all this. So it's like, where is this coming from?
Yep. Same for me. Because mine also started before COVID. And when COVID hit, I really enjoyed the excuse to get out of social events. I liked that you didn't have to make up reasons or tell anyone that you're struggling because in my circle at the time, they wouldn't have really understood. They would have just said, like, okay, suck it up and come out and you'll feel better. But that's not the reality, especially when you're going through an awakening. And just like we both described, we felt very alone. We felt like we had no one to talk to. And we didn't realize that we were going through these things because we couldn't talk about it and have someone's opinion because the people we did know at the time, we were shedding. We were like shedding the skin of the person that we used to be.
Yes.
Because with the spiritual awakening, we change personalities as well, and we change who we are because we're evolving. And that leads to finding a new community, a community of people who understand. And you and I met through this awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like having a whole community to talk to, or even just one person to talk to. We both felt the same way with many of these scenarios. And I think that that's really important to let anyone who's going through this know that there is a community out there. There is a person out there that you can relate to. And even if this episode just tells one person or helps one person realize that they're not alone in the struggle of an awakening, because it's not all butterflies and rainbows. It's hell. It's really hell a lot of the time.
Yeah. I have to say too, for me personally, I listen to so many podcasts, read books, all of that stuff. And they would always talk about finding your tribe, finding your tribe. And
Yeah.
it drive me crazy because here I am 3.5 years into this, and I feel like I'm finally
Yeah.
attracting my tribe. That's what they would say. You will attract your tribe.
I know.
there's nobody around me that I know that is really into this, or like I know of some people who are, and I would join like little, little gatherings and things like that. But I would say I probably met some really cool people, but never really walked away keeping in touch with very
Yeah,
involved. Not until hypnotic arts, at least.
agreed. Kinship with Gina Sear from Past Lives in the Divine, and then Hypnotic Arts, same thing. Like as soon as I was partnered up with you, reached out to you, and I felt like we were kindred souls. We connected in so many ways, and we have so much in common. And I'm so grateful that I found my tribe and I found my people.
Mhm.
But it's so much harder than these YouTube videos or all these podcasts that make it seem like, okay, find your tribe and then you're good. Yeah, but how do we do that? And Gina really created a space where we can do that. And
Mhm.
I am eternally grateful for that, because I really still today, like I have a few people in my physical orbit that I can talk to you about this stuff. But it took talking to you and talking to other women in these groups to gain my confidence to bring it up to these people.
Yeah.
You don't want people to think you're crazy, because I thought I was going crazy at one point. So what's to say that they're not going to think the same thing?
Yeah, I think for me too, I have such a fear of putting myself out there. And
Mhm.
so I already have that fear. And now I'm going through something that's totally new to me.
Yeah.
I'm getting into experiences that I've never experienced before. And a lot of things are happening to me, and I don't know how to talk to people about that. So I think already being afraid to put myself out there really made it a lot harder.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes.
Give yourself a break. Take the day off work. Go walk in nature. Do something that feels good to you. Today, I cleaned my house from top to bottom and I feel really great. Is there any advice that you have for anyone who goes through those depressive stages or dark night of the soul?
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced it so many times myself, and I've always had the mentality of I have to do everything. I have to do it all myself. Everything is on me. I have to push,
Yeah.
push, push, like that grind mentality. And I'm really trying to get away from that. And I think, first of all, honoring yourself and knowing I'm going through the motions and allowing yourself to feel those emotions is really important. Just like
Mhm.
you said, taking the time to rest. I have to say, nobody needs permission to do that. But if
Yeah.
you feel like you do, this is your permission.
Yeah.
Resting is productive too. One of the things someone said to me once in the beginning when I was really going through it was you can't give from an empty cup.
Yeah.
You have to fill your cup first and give from the overflowing. So resting is productive. Taking care of yourself so you can do all those things that you need to do is productive.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of guilt that comes with it, but it's okay. I think that that's one of the hardest lessons I learned is that you don't need to feel guilty for taking the time for yourself, because that was so hard for me in the beginning. And my husband too would even be like, "You don't need permission. You're putting all this on yourself." And it's true, but it's just I don't know, is that my conditioning growing up or like
Yeah. It's definitely society and conditioning.
yeah, absolutely. And I think so many people are in that grind mentality where they have to work so much. And also too, I mean, it's not just a mentality. I think it's the society that we live in as well. Because
Yeah.
obviously we have to work. We have to make a living to afford the things we need in our lives. And I get that. But at the same time, there is no harm in taking a day to yourself.
Yeah. I agree. So let's talk about your awakening. Do you remember the first moment when you realized that you were awakening?
Yes, the first moment I realized I was already a year into it. It was during an Akashic Records reading, and I had asked a bunch of questions, and the person I had the reading with, his name is Neil. He's from Global Akasha. He is a psychic medium, and he went through the whole reading. He answered my questions, and then he told me, he's like, what you are experiencing is an awakening. And I was in shock because I didn't really realize that I was, because of all the stories I had heard didn't match what I was going through. So that was probably about a year into it. Um, but I know I definitely questioned it, but I think finally accepting it and maybe putting a label on it, it was that moment, a good year into the whole shift.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was dealing with the headache and I was tired. And it's so funny. I listen back to the reading, because always record your readings
Yes.
because you'll be amazed when you go back and listen to it what makes sense now, what that didn't make sense then.
Yeah.
So I have listened to it a couple of times since, and it's funny because I was just out of it, in so much pain, and I just was very monotone. Like, there, I was not showing very much emotion. And we did some crazy things in this reading, which I can get into later. But like my reaction to it was just very mellow. It's funny to think about now.
Yeah, I remember looking back at who I was, or like watching videos, even looking at photos. I am a completely different person now. The girl I was back then, I barely recognize. I actually remember the first time I had a reading done by Margaret, my local go-to reader. I think I was in my late 20s when I had that reading, and it made me realize that I've been getting messages from my guides my entire life. Margaret did a palm reading. She saw that my lifeline had a notch in it, which means I had a checkpoint at that time in my life. She said it would have been when I was about 18 years old. She explained that this meant I had a choice to live or die. Obviously, I chose to live since I'm still here. She said because I chose to live, I will live for a very, very long time. During the reading, I couldn't believe it when she said that, because when I was 18, I made the decision to leave an abusive relationship. I felt in that moment that leaving could have meant that I would be leaving this world if I didn't play it safe. Long story short, my mom always spoke to me about these things, abusive relationships and being careful around men. When I told her what Margaret said, she was actually speechless, because she apparently felt she was going to lose one of her kids pretty much our entire childhood. She did say that she felt it would be me, and she felt overly worried about me when I was in relationships. And I think that might have been her intuition, because she's very spiritual, telling her that this was a path I was possibly going to choose. My mom knew the relationship wasn't healthy, but she didn't know the extent of the abuse. And one day she brought me a book by Jay McGraw on self-confidence for teens, and I remember reading one line that said something like, "You're a divine being and worthy of love." And something clicked in my mind, which I now see as my guides trying to tell me something or bring something up for me, a message. And that's when I decided I wanted more for myself. I was going to break up with him. I got another message as soon as I made that decision to call my brother. Not say anything, but call him and hide the phone, so my boyfriend at the time didn't know I had called someone for help. And normally I wouldn't want to involve anybody, but this time I decided to listen. And now, talking about spiritual awakening, I know that was a message. Back then, I thought it was just my brain thinking or analyzing something, but for sure it was a message. My brother showed up at the exact right moment, and saved me by telling the boyfriend that my dad was on his way, and he ran out of the apartment, and I was safe. I never looked back from that point on. I valued myself so much, and I never allowed anyone to mistreat me again, which is extremely powerful. How one line in one book can really be that pivotal moment where you change the way that you're living and the way that you think about yourself and your worth. It was really powerful.
Wow. I I think I've had chills the entire time you were just speaking.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
and it's beautiful the messages that you get from your guides that you might not know you're getting,
Yeah.
because I truly believe that someone talked to me. I would have not called my brother. I would rather deal with things on my own and not bring other people into it. But that day I was like, no, I'm going to call, I'm going to listen to this voice and I'm going to call. And the next thing, the next sign and synchronicity that I felt, I was smoking a lot of weed. I was on sick leave. I really had no motives in life. I didn't know what was happening in my life. And that was like the awakening beginning. And I was outside listening to Gina's podcast. And I was sitting on my back porch on the steps and facing two houses. So I could see their roofs. And there, when I looked up, I saw 6 crows on one roof just staring at me. Do you guys have crows there?
Oh, mm-hmm.
They're scary. Okay, like and when you have 6 of them staring at you and not making any noise, I was like, okay, wait a second. This is weird.
Mm-hmm.
And so I paused the podcast, and then one crow on the other roof. So there was 6 on one roof, 1 on the other. That one started making noise. It started cawing. And it was looking at me. They were all looking at me. It was enough to startle me that I was like, my mom told me to look up these meanings. So I looked up 7 crows. And what I saw, so you basically, when you see a sign or something that stands out to you, look it up. And the first article that comes up, believe in it. And so I clicked on it, and it said, you are about to embark on a spiritual journey, a very impactful and meaningful spiritual journey. And I was like, well, I now believe in the universe and birds and the divine. And that was the moment that I realized this is real.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, they creep me out sometimes. Like, I love all animals, but birds, when they look at you, like they're looking into your soul, or I don't know what's happening, but it can be creepy. But they are, from what the spiritual meanings are, the messengers from the other side.
Wow. I have to tell you about this dream I had the other night. Oh my gosh. So, do you ever, okay, this always happens to me where I'm like on the verge of falling asleep and I have like this reoccurring dream that happens and then you kind of like jerk awake. Do you ever
Yeah.
have?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've always had like a reoccurring one. It's always been the same dream. But the other night, this maybe was a week ago, I was like just falling asleep, and all of a sudden, I'm like in the dream state, and I'm walking down a road, and I go to turn the corner, and there's an emu, right? An emu bolting towards me, and it scared the living shit out of me. I jumped. I was like sweating. It startled me awake so much. And, now that I'm headed to this road, I know to look these things up. The emu totem animal is associated with guidance, wisdom, and trickery. And I was like, he was headed right toward me. Scared me. And of all the random birds, an emu,
Yeah, like he's big, right? They're big.
they're big, almost kind of like an ostrich type of, but imagine, can you see, where am I here? Can you see
Oh,
that?
yeah. Yeah, no, I would not be okay with that.
No. No, and I don't think they're the nicest. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to dig more into that, I think.
Yeah. I had this one incident, which is a funny incident, not spiritual awakening at all. But I was in college and I was walking to the school, and there's this big parking lot, and there was a seagull. You guys have those there?
Yes.
So the seagull goes and picks up a McDonald's bag and flew, but because I guess it was a little heavy, he didn't have as much of pickup as he wanted,
Mhm.
and so he was coming right at my face. And he decided to abort mission, but as he aborted, he threw the McDonald's bag into my face.
Oh my gosh.
And I was humiliated. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm going back home because a seagull threw McDonald's at me, and I don't feel good about this situation at all.
And that's it for today's episode. Until next time, stay curious.